Thank you very much, Wanjiru. I'll just go right straight into my presentation. The role of the courts and the lawyers. I've listened to Senator Murkomen, and that is where now we come in as lawyers and the court. What is our role and what is expected of us? We are required to ensure that the Constitution is respected to the letter, and that is why we move to the courts, so that we get interpretation of the laws. It may be misunderstood at times that we are interfering with the processes, but that is why we have the courts there for us. Without it, we then would have a state of anarchy and confusion. The big question for lawyers: what or how do we attain the requirement of principles of checks and balances? LSK must suffer in this debate in whether we are breeding constitutionalism for posterity or impunity. We have seen what has been happening, that yes, we have a very good constitution, but some of us are still locked up in the previous era. We forget that this constitution now belongs to the people of Kenya. It's not enshrined to one person who will be wielding power. The power comes from you and I, the Kenyan people, and we have given it to Parliament, we have given it to the judiciary, and we have given it to the executive. And it's clearly demonstrated there in Article 2. We are seeing also constant tussle of power, fighting between institutions, who is superior to the other. None of these institutions are superior. You represent the people of Kenya. You wield the interests of the people of Kenya. So it is time for us to keep reminding you of this, and the only way we can do that is to move the courts for them to interpret and make it very clear as to what the mandate that has been given to you by the Constitution. Now, stemming from this logic is whether we are proceeding to have devolution implemented and effected as is expected, or it will die a natural death as it did in the 60s. And I'm glad to hear Senator refer to what happened then in the 60s. We ignored all these things, and we let us just say, oh, we are still too young, and we decided to give ourselves time. I think it is the right time for us, and as CSOs, it's our responsibility to hold to account all these institutions, whether we are told we are interfering or not. And that takes me to the mandate of the Law Society of Kenya. What is our mandate? We are a statutory body. Under Section 3, we have been given the powers to advise the government and the general public on matters legislation and administration, and on administration of justice, which includes devolution. And we have seen the discussions that have been going on. We have gone through Chapter 11 of the Constitution, and we have found it necessary that we cannot just keep quiet. We must ensure that Wanjiku benefits. Centralization of power has not worked for us since 1963 to 2010, when we now came up with this constitution. We want to see development across the country equally, fairly. Those who are left behind must catch up with those of us who are ahead. So if we kill devolution now, then we will not be attaining that goal. Now, the role of the lawyer is to move the court. We move to the High Court to have these orders or seek interpretation of the Constitution, of legislation, where we feel that there are issues that are not very clear, or where there's confusion that is arising. I've seen, unfortunately, some of my colleagues, I don't know what happens when we cross the threshold and get either to the Senate or National Assembly. We tend to forget, even where we were champions of the rule of law, we tend to forget this, and we move in a direction where some of the debates leaves a lot to be desired, to an extent where we are receiving petitions that we should actually take action against our own members. But we as a LSK have decided we are going to dialogue with our colleagues so that at least we can also understand where they are coming from. We move to courts to obtain orders. Now, once an order has been granted, do I ignore it? What does Article 159(2) say? Justice shall be done to all irrespective of status. So once I have moved to court and I get this order, should it be disregarded whether I agree with it or not? And many a times, and of course from what we have seen, we call them interlocutory, that is interim orders, pending final determination. Whether you're happy with it or not, whether you feel the court was entitled to grant that order or not, the first order of the day is respect that court order. Go back to court, move for it to be varied, so that you explain to the court, because if you ignore appearance in court, how do you expect now the court to hold your brief, so to speak, and articulate or address your case? If you ignore, then the orders will be confirmed as a final order of the court, and that's what we've been seeing happening. I know there's a debate whether National Assembly can be injuncted, Parliament can be injuncted on all those issues, but the only forum where you can challenge once an interim order is granted is back to the same court. If you ignore it, then we will be ignoring the cardinal tenets of the rule of law. We have seen that the High Court, of course, has the obligation to uphold the rule of law and constitutionalism. It may pronounce itself on any constitutional matter and has been removed that has been moved before it by an aggrieved party. And anybody, be it a member of public, and we see it even now, there's public interest litigation. Any person can move the court. You can move the court if you feel that something is going wrong. Once a pronouncement is made, you must then respect that pronouncement. But we are seeing a lot of chest thumping that is taking place, respectfully to my colleague and brother's senator, and it has left us wondering, what are we demonstrating to the public out there? If I now, as an individual in a civil case, I move the court and I get a court order, equal arms of government as far as we are concerned, but the court of law has been given an extra mandate to determine and interpret issues. If we do not allow the courts to do their work as independent institutions, then we will not be respecting our constitution. And I call upon all of us, I'm not just directing it at the National Assembly, the Senate, but I'm directing it to the Kenyan people at large. These laws are not made in vain. They are made for us, or the orders are not given in vain. They are made for us to respect them. If we don't respect them, of course, there are consequences. Contempt of court. Somebody, the other day we saw the police commissioner saying he's not able to effect a court order. We came out at the Law Society and we said, really? How can you tell us that? We expect you to enforce a court order, irrespective of who it is directed to. We will go and deal with the issue in court when now you say you are misguided as a court. But if you absent yourself, our take is you have then allowed the courts to make the decision without hearing you. You must avail yourself at every forum, whether you are agreeable with the process or not. Disregarding the obligation to comply or appeal a court order is a form of impunity, and it is taking root. Unfortunately, if we don't nip it in the bud now, I don't know what will happen in the next 2 years or so. It will now degenerate down to the Wanjikos, who will now say, yes, I've been given this court order. I will continue encroaching on your property. Utadu. We don't want the utadu attitude. That is why we came up with this constitution. And I think it is a high time for us to seriously introspect and interrogate and understand the current constitution. I don't refer to it as Constitution 2010 or the new constitution. It is our constitution. It is a letter that we have right now. It is a guiding document. And let us also not be in a hurry to push for amendments, because let us remember where we came from. We had authorities that were so powerful that you and I had no voice. We now have a voice. It is time for us to respect this document. The slides go on. I see we are pressed for time. I would have said a bit more on that, but as lawyers, don't just think that we are out to make a quick buck. We are not. We defend. We bring these matters to court. We interrogate these documents, and we make sure that at the end of the day, issues are considered. The governor Wambora got an order. People are saying we are not going to respect those orders. They are idiotic. Really? From the National Assembly, Speaker of the National Assembly? If anything was to happen in Kenya today, you would take leadership as the Speaker of the National Assembly. Would you be guiding the country in the right direction? So our take is, at the end of the day, orders must be respected. We must be able to speak our minds. It is the LSK's position that independence of the judiciary can never be compromised, and that court decisions must be obeyed unreservedly. That one we will continue understating. And for us to be able to implement the provisions of even the Intergovernmental Relations Act, today you say this. These are judges and officers of the court, judicial officers. They read all these things that you're saying. Really? Do you think that having said all these things and not considered some of the consequences of your utterances, you will be able to get the orders that you're seeking? They're supposed to be independent and consider issues, but let us also consider and remember that we are human. My parting shot, I've been told there's a very short time. I understand the senator has to get to another meeting. Courts and lawyers have a vanguard role to play in protecting devolution and constitutionalism. We will not stop at doing that. We will move the court. Even if the public doesn't do it, the Law Society will continue in its mandate under Section 4 to move the court under the Constitution. Public interest litigation is our core mandate right now, and we are going to pursue all these matters. Respecting decisions from the court as canvassed by lawyers is an act of consolidating devolution, and if we don't do this, then we are going to kill devolution. I'm glad to hear that Senator has said he's pro-devolution, contrary to what we read out there. He has now asserted to us that he's with devolution 100%, and will continue working with the Senate and the National Assembly so that we ensure that these services are devolved. Governors, senators, National Assembly, we shall hold all of you. Thank you very much.